I do not wish to boast, but I had the good fortune to grow up in a family steeped in wealth. At a young age, barely 16 years old, I became interested in entrepreneurship, and, as you can probably guess, my efforts were quite successful. However, I remained single all this time, not looking to start a family or a long-term relationship. But that all changed when I met her. We bonded in marriage, but alas, our union crumbled after just 3 months due to her infidelity. Now I, Martin, a 34-year-old man, will tell you about the consequences faced by my former spouse, Elizabeth, who was 5 years younger than me. I first met Elizabeth at a friend's party 9 months before we were married. Her compelling beauty captivated me at first sight. In the process, she revealed herself as a woman with a gentle nature, seeking the independence I could give her, thanks to my thriving business, which brought me a solid income. But as it turned out, money does not always guarantee happiness. My friends and acquaintances were not sparing in their criticism of Elizabeth. In the past, she was known as a fickle party girl, which, however, did not affect my decision. I was convinced that time had changed her, and my ego played no small part in that. At that time, I was 34 years old, and I had devoted a significant part of my life to the business I love. But now I was ready to start a family and thought Elizabeth was the perfect choice. I proposed to her while vacationing on a private island, and our wedding was a huge event that was the talk of the town. The media coverage and public attention was overwhelming, and everyone seemed to want to be a part of the event. On our wedding day, Elizabeth and I decided that we each needed a separate room for personal space, realizing the importance of individuality in marriage. We respected each other's aspirations and provided space for personal growth. Trust was key in our relationship, allowing us to support each other's well-being and maintain a healthy balance between our personal and couple lives. To celebrate the wedding, I organized a cruise for Elizabeth and her friends, thinking it would give her the freedom to enjoy special moments with loved ones. But her constant partying and night outings were thought-provoking. I sincerely wished for Elizabeth's happiness and well-being, but her behavior began to have a negative impact on our relationship. She confided to me that her background was not as noble as mine, and adapting to our wealthy lifestyle was a challenge for her. I tried to understand her and decided to give her time to adjust to being the wife of a successful man. 3 months have passed since our wedding, and Elizabeth still lives in a separate room. Although we sometimes share moments of love and passion, there is an emotional distance between us that makes me wonder if there are deeper issues in our relationship. I decided that I needed to find out the truth and help her feel at home by considering discussing my concerns with her. I decided to wait a week before having a serious conversation, hoping it would be a more sensitive approach. I was concerned about her desire to live apart, but it seemed normal to me, as this was my first long-term relationship that I genuinely wanted to build. One day, while gathering papers for a meeting, I discovered that Elizabeth was not home. A gust of curiosity prompted me to look around her room. I had no specific purpose and trusted her, but that day some inner force drove me to take that step. While searching, I found an invitation to a private party in her room thrown in her honor. In it, she was eulogized as the most beautiful woman deserving the love of every man. Puzzled, I found out that the party would be held at my competitor's private villa, which surprised and angered me. How dare he invite my wife? Believing her to be faithful, I decided to check the place out after all. I called Elizabeth, who said she was going to spend the night at a friend's house. However, my trust was already low and I went to the villa. Arriving at the place, I saw Elizabeth's car, which confirmed her presence. Trying to remain inconspicuous, I peeked through the window and saw a group of men in varying degrees of nudity, which puzzled me. I was about to ring the doorbell when I saw Elizabeth among them. Her appearance shocked me. She was practically naked, wearing only her underwear. I found myself in a state of shock, unable to express any emotion, and concluded that this was probably the worst thing I had seen all day. One of the men walked up to Elizabeth and kissed her, causing her to laugh, while the others began to cheer her on. My feelings were replaced with a mixture of rage and frustration, and I was determined to get Elizabeth out of this situation. I quickly headed towards the main entrance, but suddenly changed my mind and returned to the window where I began taking notes of everyone present. Among them were 7 men, my business rivals, and of course Elizabeth. At that moment, I could barely contain the urge to call in the thugs to break into their party and teach everyone involved in this outrage a lesson. I pondered how I could use the situation against my competitors and punish the unfaithful wife. I left the place thinking of a plan to embarrass them and teach Elizabeth a lesson. Walking away from the villa to my car, I felt trapped in madness. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was providing Elizabeth with everything she desired. Our nights were passionate and our days full of experiences. But her incomprehensible actions awakened in me a desire for revenge. Frankly, I was confused, not understanding why Elizabeth had acted the way she did. When she returned home the next evening, her calmness, despite her betrayal the night before, amazed me. I held back my anger and sense of betrayal by feigning indifference and asking about her sleepover. She described it as a casual hangout with friends, but my thoughts were preoccupied with plans for revenge. Consumed with anger and a thirst for retribution, I decided to punish them for interfering in my life. Pretending to go on a business trip, I informed Elizabeth about the hiring of a personal secretary named Jennifer. Upon introducing her to Elizabeth, I noticed her discomfort, but insisted that Jennifer always accompany me on urgent matters. The next morning, Jennifer came into our bedroom to wake me up, much to Elizabeth's surprise. I apologized and left the house, saying I would be back in 2 weeks. Staying at the hotel, I began to scrutinize Elizabeth's actions, gathering information on the 7 partygoers, and hired a personal detective to do so. Having gathered evidence of their undignified actions, I was determined to make them pay for their actions. Elizabeth may have acted rashly, but the fact that they took advantage of her weakness does not make them better personally or professionally. Elizabeth represented a unique case that caused me to personally examine her actions. It was a new and exciting experience, albeit a painful one. My goal was to observe her behavior during the 2 weeks of my absence, waiting for her to leave our home. I kept a close eye on her car and found out that she had met Tony Phillip, my main competitor, at a hotel. They had lunch together, laughing and displaying physical intimacy. After dinner, Phillip took her to his villa, and I decided not to witness the rest of their evening. Tony Phillip has been my enemy since as far back as 2015, trying to destroy my business using illegal methods. I won't go into details, but he was a dishonest and greedy man. Using information from my personal detective, I found contact information for Tony's fiancée and anonymously informed her of the surprise Tony was planning, giving her the address of their meeting. When she arrived, the guards I'd bribed secured her access to the villa. Finding herself face to face with Tony in a compromising situation, she threw her engagement ring at him and decided to break off the engagement and take her investment from his business. Apparently, Tony chose her not only for love, but also for financial gain. It was a real shame for him. I used similar tactics with other men, exposing their infidelities and holding them accountable for their actions. The culmination of my plan was to organize a meeting of all these men. I invited Elizabeth, presenting her as the only woman who understood and did not judge them, because they had all lost their wives after exposing their infidelity. The party was held at the villa, where I paid a security guard several $100s to install hidden cameras all over the place, including the restrooms. There were about 70 guests. When the event started, I initiated a live broadcast available to everyone to reveal the truth of what was happening. My company and other companies' screens broadcast the events of the party, showing the indiscretions of the party participants. I made sure in advance that guests had their phones taken away at the entrance so that they would not realize the broadcast and assume it was a private event. The chaos that ensued and the endless ringing of phones only increased my satisfaction that their professional and personal lives were on display. As I pondered my actions toward Elizabeth, I came to the conclusion that her feelings toward me were insincere. She seemed to be driven by the financial benefits and privileges associated with marrying me. Now, looking back, I realized my mistake in falling in love with a man who turned out to be a gold digger. It was my mistake, for I could have foreseen it in advance. The pursuit of wealth was acceptable in itself, but what bothered me was her attempt to deceive me by posing as a faithful wife while she not only had affairs but also relationships with other people. Often while talking to my business associates, I noticed hints of their secret relationships with Elizabeth, which was unacceptable to me. Exposing not only Elizabeth, but sending a clear message to these men became my mission. I uploaded all the video footage of the party, leaving a message to Elizabeth of my imminent arrival. The cameras captured them in an intimate embrace, which was key to my plan. I gave Elizabeth ample time to return home, unaware of what awaited her. Upon entering the house, accompanied by Jennifer, I greeted Elizabeth carelessly and focused all my attention on Jennifer, ignoring Elizabeth's feelings. Her feelings of despair and disregard indicated that my revenge plan had begun to take effect. I strategically avoided Elizabeth, knowing that her lovers were facing legal problems and could not contact her. I blocked all contact and kept her in the dark about the recorded material. Elizabeth felt unwanted and ignored in her own home, while Jennifer took over the household chores. When Elizabeth complained to me about Jennifer's intrusion, I brushed off her concerns, wanting her to believe that what was happening was normal. Amplifying the mind game, I suggested Elizabeth spend time with friends at the club, secretly observing her amusement. I prepared for an unexpected turn of events that she would never forget, eagerly awaiting her reaction. Every detail of this plan had been carefully thought out. Elizabeth returned drunk around midnight and found me on the couch with Jennifer sitting on my lap. Confused, she demanded an explanation. I invited her to join us, thus aggravating her anger. After accusing me of infidelity, she had no idea that I was preparing the final reveal. As she stood next to me, I turned on the compromising footage on the home theater screen. The huge 4K plasma screen reflected her shock and disbelief in full when she saw the evidence of my actions. Asking where I got it from, I admitted that I had recorded the whole thing myself. Her attempts to find words to explain were unsuccessful, and a heady silence settled over the room, emphasizing the weight of her guilt and regret. I had caught her off guard, and she couldn't find the words to justify it. Sitting on the couch, I watched the recorded material with interest, while she shifted her gaze uncertainly from the screen to me. It was unclear whether the situation upset me or rather amused me. Commenting, I expressed my gratitude for her interaction with one of the people whose skills I admired. Gesturing, I invited her to join me to go over the tapes together. She reluctantly agreed, bowing her head, fully aware of her significant mistake while watching the video. I noticed a discomfort on her face that expressed regret and realization of what was happening, especially after watching 2 hours of footage. It was funny to emphasize her amazing connections with close friends who seemed to feel comfortable in her presence. Elizabeth, realizing the seriousness of her actions, remained silent, only humbly apologizing. She tried to explain that these men had convinced her to spend the night with them in the face of pressure, but I was impressed with her ability to make up stories. I pretended to believe her, assuming that she might have used our marital status to avoid consequences. However, she claimed she did so to avoid tarnishing her reputation by continuing her convincing game of victimhood. I motioned for her to go to the dining room table for a glass of water. As she placed the glass on a piece of paper, she saw the same invitation she had previously hidden under the dresser. When the glass suddenly slipped from her hands and shattered on the floor, Elizabeth realized that further attempts to dodge were futile, as I already knew everything about her actions. She fell to the ground and burst into tears, but her tears could no longer be salvation. I forced her to confess everything that had happened. I made the painful but decisive decision to kick Elizabeth out of the house despite her pleas for a second chance. My decision was firm. Forgiveness was not an option in this case. It was a difficult choice, but I recognized its necessity. I couldn't allow a cheating woman to have a place in my heart and home. Elizabeth begged for forgiveness, justifying her actions by her inability to think clearly under the influence of the wealth and attention of those around her. Learning lessons from my past, I remained adamant that such mistakes should not be repeated for the sake of preserving my own well-being and self-respect. I made a promise to myself: if feelings for someone ever arise again, I will carefully evaluate whether that person is suitable to enter my life. This valuable lesson was a direct result of the betrayal I experienced from Elizabeth. Within a week of learning of her infidelity, I immediately instructed my attorney to prepare divorce papers, convinced that she should get nothing from me after the chaos she had brought into my life. I took steps to expose her actions and hold her accountable by distributing photos and videos of her cheating to the media, damaging her reputation. I took steps to alert major companies to the undesirability of hiring Elizabeth and continued to employ a private investigator to monitor her actions, remaining aware of her actions. My goal was to show her the problems she would face without my support and to make her regret the consequences of her disbelief. I also took steps to make it difficult for her to find housing and a job, despite her refusal to agree to an amicable divorce and her insistence on alimony. Her peremptory demands of finances and assets amused me. Elizabeth even resorted to deception, falsely claiming pregnancy in order to obtain alimony and property in the name of the unborn child. I counterattacked by demanding a DNA test, which eventually exposed her lies and led to a defamation case and divorce proceedings. Elizabeth, who seemed like a lovely woman, turned out to be motivated by financial gain, which explained her unwillingness to share living space with me. The realization was painful, but I am grateful to have uncovered her true intentions before the situation escalated. The adage "love is blind" has taken on a deep personal meaning for me. As I embarked on this difficult path, I faced both blindness and insecurity. Elizabeth's actions not only destroyed our marriage, but also left a stain on my reputation, which is reflected in the judgmental glances and derisive comments of those around me. These circumstances weighed down the process of coping with the aftermath of such a devastating revelation. Eventually, Elizabeth returned to her parents in a small town where, as far as I know, she took a job as a waitress in a local bar. I don't feel gloating towards her, rather her fate makes me sympathize with her. She could have built a happy future, we could have had children, but she made her choice. I think the consequences she faced are not as harsh as they could have been. Perhaps my kindness is misplaced here, but I will not change my character. I believe that true heights are reached by those who maintain kindness and pursue happiness. This experience has not made me despise all women. On the contrary, I am sure that I will soon be able to find one with whom I can live a long and happy life. This story is really exciting and multifaceted, providing a lot of material for reflection. The correctness of the main character's actions is a complex and meaningful question. On the one hand, you can understand his desire to take revenge for betrayal and deceit, as well as to protect his own reputation and business. On the other hand, the methods he chose may seem too cruel and vindictive. The complexity of the situation is compounded by the suggestion that the protagonist may have planned his actions in advance as a strategy against his competitors. This adds an element of cunning calculation and strategic planning to the story. However, it is important to remember that any relationship should be built on mutual respect and trust, not on deception and manipulation. The main character may indeed have learned important lessons from his experience, realizing the importance of better understanding and analyzing the motives of others before entering into a serious relationship with them. The story also raises questions about morality, ethics, and personal responsibility in complex human relationships. Ultimately, each reader can decide for themselves whether or not they feel the main character's actions are justified or not, based on their personal worldview and set of values.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.